Hallo und willkommen bei SCI.
What? Did you change is there?
Stage. If you change your there's a language setting, just change it to English with subtitles.
So we don't have variation labels for the show, right?
Let's not talk German, guys.
Aber wieso nicht? Ist doch so eine schöne Sprache, oder nicht? Nee?
No.
So
Dennis,
we were doing
Nick
German
is
jokes
German.
earlier. It was very funny.
Nick is German, all right?
I was German.
So that
I'm
you
South
know,
African
he
now. I'm
was.
rehabilitated.
How do you just not become? I don't understand that. I'm South African. I'm born here. I will never not be South African, even if I move and I get a different nationality. So
You can't
Nick
get
doesn't tell
the German out of you.
You know,
Well,
you can
Nick-
take the German out of the country, but can you take the country out of the German?
Oh, I don't think so.
We're a minute and 5 seconds into the show. Nick, can you do your bit, please?
Thank you, and hi everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of SCI Fridays, entitled "I Have Been Breached. What Now?"
Good question.
He's supposed to say roll the jingle, right?
didn't say.
Roll the jingle.
Welcome to SCI Fridays, your portal into security compliance, identity management, and you. Did I do it right, Nick?
And me.
Was that how? Because Dennis, we've been, and we'll introduce our current guest to everyone in a bit. But Nick, every week you complain about how I introduced the show. Did I do it right now?
It's okay. We'll work on it.
All right. If you are new to the channel, we talk about things that get us excited, scared. I've been breached. What do I do now? Dismayed, but mostly excited about cloud security. Well, I'd like to call it governance, risk, and compliance solutions in the cloud. So pull up a chair, grab your wine. It is Friday after all. The last plane has flown over the mountain, so everyone's about to make a fire in South Africa, Dennis. They make a fire. We get real wood. We make it this high, and then we cook meat on top of it like Neanderthals, right? That's what we do.
And
the rest of the world barbecues
good word.
outside. The what?
Good word. It's called a braai.
Right. Yeah.
A braai.
I don't have a Satya statement this week, Nick. I don't. Do we have a Nick statement? Do we have a Nick statement?
Since I'm completely unprepared for this moment, I'm going to say no. And let's introduce Dennis.
All right. Welcome, Dennis Dols. Did I say the surname right? Dols?
Yeah,
How do we
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Tell us a bit about yourself. Well, we know what your name and your surname is. What do you do? Why are you on the show? Why do we consider you an expert? And then also, what is daylight savings a thing for you?
All right. So I'm a partner manager with QS Solutions, which means that I work with both partners like yourselves as well as with end customers to talk about their cybersecurity strategy, basically, right? So as QS Solutions, we're developing security and governance software, and I'm basically working with our partners to resell that all around the world. So both in South Africa as well as Australia, Korea, US, Latin America, everywhere we have partners representing us with our tooling. And I'm talking with them about building a cybersecurity strategy on the partner level. But of course, that also goes into the discussions, okay, what do we need to do with our clients? How do we advise them on improving their security? So that's my day-to-day business, basically. And I do that with a couple of colleagues, of course. So great team, great effort. I'm based in the Netherlands. So we could try and speak a little bit of Afrikaans if you want. Let's give that a try instead of German. And what else is there to tell? I normally would travel quite often, of course. Now it's hosting shows like this. So hopefully I can attend a braai with you guys anytime soon, and we have some Friday afternoon drinks. Hope
for sure, definitely. Well, we it's a standing invitation to show up in South Africa. You tell us what time you arrive at the airport, we'll come pick you up.
All right.
Coming back to what you were saying earlier on about you work for a company that does cybersecurity things, right? And episode 8, I've been breached. Naturally, when companies are breached, their sites have been pulled down, or the e-commerce site's been hacked, or they've infiltrated the network and they're running around grabbing personal data and all of the other things, right? You talk about cybersecurity strategy. For me, my biggest thing is when a customer says we've been breached, normally we want to go in and understand what happened, right? And a lot of the times customers are coming to us and saying, hey, we cool and stuff, but we don't know how to do security in the cloud efficiently and effectively. And I'm assuming that you exist because you're assisting customers with their strategy. So where would customers start on their journey to the cloud, or if they're in the cloud, what should they do once they're there? Can you take us through where would they start?
Sure. And I think it actually doesn't really matter where you are, right? If you're still on-prem or maybe fully in the cloud, the way you view your company's security strategy is the same, right? It's just, it's the resources you have, but the strategy stays the same overall. And I think what we should acknowledge is that the question that you ask, Alistair, is a very valid question. And it's a question that many companies forget to ask themselves, because they're running around, see some vulnerability, they run after the vulnerability, try to remediate that. But then where's the overall coordination and strategy in all of that, right? So we're in many cases, we're becoming very reactive to security vulnerabilities. And I think that's the first thing when we start talking about a security strategy. Let's try to change that into becoming more proactive instead of reactive. I think that's the biggest win for all of us, right? So that I think that's the first point. And then secondly, I think we should also acknowledge that organizations need help to figure out where they are when it comes to security. Right? It's such a broad topic. It's such a holistic view that you need in order to address the right areas at the right time. Right? We can talk about frameworks and we can talk about different law and regulation, and everybody has their opinion and their preferred framework. But I think using frameworks to start with gives you an insight into, okay, these are the different elements. This is where I'm scoring on this framework. And this is where I'm running risks. And if you do that properly, it's not just an IT and security discussion, right? You can even involve business management and the board of directors to make a conscious decision about what risk is acceptable and what not. And if you start with that decision, then you can have the talks about what technology, what is the budget, what do we need. But first you need to make that risk decision. What do we allow and what do we disallow?
I love the mature approach that you have, that businesses should decide what level of risk is acceptable, because some of our customers believe that risk is something that can be addressed in its entirety and therefore mitigated in its entirety. But to be fair, even our customers who are countries with nearly unlimited budgets are not able to get to zero risk. So I love that you framed this in a mature manner around risk is not something that we can mitigate entirely, but we can decide what level of risk that we are willing to live with. One of the things that we've spoken a lot about is the concept of zero trust and then assuming breach. And a lot of our customers want to adopt a methodology or a framework. And if we start with something like zero trust, we don't actually know where to begin, because if we're assuming breach, where do we begin? Is that something you can talk to?
Yeah, absolutely. Zero trust is a great architecture, I would say, right? So in my mind, many people call it also a framework, but it's more or less an architecture or a way of implementing security, right? It's a strategy, it's a mindset. But you can't find really a maturity in zero trust, right? That's pretty hard to do. You can be zero trust and you can have a zero trust strategy, but where is the maturity in that? And therefore, what we are using, and there's tons of frameworks out there, but we are using the Center for Internet Security, the CIS controls, as a framework, right? So So that, and in that framework, we tie maturity scores in there. So you can see, okay, I don't have anything on this control, and I have really good security on that control. And if you just take a typical example, many organizations, especially the organizations that exist for quite some time, they have invested in infrastructure security, right? So the boundaries, the firewall, those type of security often is there. But if we look at data security, employee awareness, those are, let's say, newer topics when it comes to security. And that's also the difference in the mindset, right? Zero Trust says assume being breached. The traditional mindset is make sure you protect the boundaries of your infrastructure. But that no longer applies. Everybody's using cloud applications, even if you think you're not. If you're not facilitating from IT, people are using cloud applications because it's simply the internet, right? It's shadow IT.
Yes.
So that's the main reason for adopting Zero Trust. I think it's definitely the best framework out there if we talk about implementation and having a strategy. But measuring on Zero Trust could sometimes be difficult. So that's why we use a combination of CIS for maturity and Zero Trust for implementation.
I love that.
I like the fact that look, I'm learning, right? I'm excited because this is probably, if we had to list our top three guests on the show, Dennis is moving closer to like second. I don't know who the top person, but I've learned, one, Zero Trust is not a framework, CIS is, and that's what you're going to use for your benchmarking. And also the traditional way of thinking is literally that, bricks and mortar, right? Perimeter security, that's the way the world has been. So when you speak to traditional infrastructure people around security, they usually lead with that, right?
Yeah.
So how do we take a customer? I mean, what is typically covered when you're doing a security assessment? You've mentioned that there's networking, but is there a sort of an audit process that it looks at the perimeter security and it goes through? And that's a leading question because I've seen some of the stuff that your product does, and the output. There's one slide in there that sort of looks at domains of technology and how it ring fits. I would love for the audience to understand that, particularly because it follows a specific regimented step process, right?
Yeah. So what we basically do is we first of all present on a management level where the risks are, right? So before we dive into anything around technology, we show the risks and then show where the company needs to focus their limited time and resources. And I think I really agree with Nicholas on this, because you can't be 100% secure, right? So you have to decide where is the risk and where not. And then secondly, then once you have found those risks and you can present that in an easy to understand overview, you can also attach technology to it, which can help remediate that risk or at least decrease, right? And I think that's how you can also map the technology implementations, aside from any changes in organizational policies and procedures, right? So let's not act as if security is plain and simple technology. It's also the policies and procedures around it. So where we can, we definitely address any technology that can help, right? So I just mentioned shadow IT, right? And then there is a great Microsoft product. It's called Cloud App Security. You can get insight into the usage of cloud applications and even have software whitelisting and blacklisting on cloud applications. So depending on the risk that's out there, you can help the client prioritize what risk is most dangerous, and then start implementing the right technologies based on the risk prioritization. Yeah? And some of the things are quick wins. Some of the things are really IT projects. So,
in the old days, or for the sake of budgets, we have customers out there that will go and say, listen, we're not going to reinvest in our current infrastructure that we have in a private data center in the building, or it's hosted somewhere else, and it's up for renewal, and we've got to drop quite a lot of money to either refresh the infrastructure or continually paying for the service that we're paying for in the private data center, right? And customers would come to us and say, hey, we want to move to the cloud, and just move us to the cloud. We'll worry about things later. What is your recommendations when it comes down? You mentioned CIS. We know that in each country, there's always legislation or regulations that sort of define the industry vertical that an organization is in. So when you look at healthcare, it's HIPAA, and financial services is PCI, and all of those things. What would you recommend customers look at when it comes to, I need to move to the cloud, I've made a decision, I'm going to Azure, I've got 400 virtual machines that I'm going to move to Azure. How do you recommend, or what do you recommend customers should look at when it comes to security and wanting to approach it from a lift and shift? Because the infrastructure still talks to bricks and mortar, perimeter security, right? And when we move it, they want a like for like, but the security is different in the cloud compared to what's on-prem, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think the good news is that eventually it becomes cheaper as well, right? So maintaining that on-prem infrastructure and trying to protect it and secure it, eventually on the long run, that will become much more expensive than migrating now. So the sooner the better. But in terms of strategy, when you start that cloud migration, I would first check out, okay, where am I now, right? Check your existing infrastructure, and not just the infrastructure itself, but I would say take a holistic perspective to security, right? So not just focus everything on one and the same document here. I don't know what's going on here. It sounds like an earthquake. I don't know if you hear that, but
well, does it sound like thunder, or does it feel like an earthquake? Right?
It felt like an earthquake, and how it sounded on your end, I don't know. But
no, well,
okay.
You've got great image stabilization because nothing moved, right?
All right, good.
So no, zero impact to the quality of this podcast or this. Awesome. What is this, Nick? Is it a podcast? What is it?
It's a show.
It's a show. All right.
It's a show.
Zero impact to the quality of the show because your house didn't move, right? When we've seen those. So just recapping what you were saying earlier on, understand the business value and the business impact when it comes to security. So mitigate the risk. Have a look at that. Subscribe to some sort of framework when looking at governance, risk, and compliance standards. And then it's an iterative process. And then also, once you've moved, get Dennis to come in and deploy some tools, because your tooling does the assessment, right? It takes things like Security Center into consideration, what they're talking about, security posture management, because that's a thing now, that's an actual term.
Yeah.
Cloud security posture management. I think CP, Cloud CSPM.
Are you making up acronyms now?
No, there is one.
It sounds like you're making up acronyms.
There's one. We'll get to buzzword bingo in a bit, but there is an actual acronym that talks about security posture. It's not just shift left and shift right? Because that's all the rage around your scene, right? And that's in next week's episode 9, Nick. Well, that might be episode 10 because episode 9 is different. So Dennis, yes, he's got 10 fingers.
I'm counting badly. Yes,
he's not Neanderthal as we think. So your closing thoughts on where should customers begin and how do they stay with the times, right? I mean, it's great. Come in, do an assessment. There's tooling and there's a stepped process in how to improve your security posture in the cloud. Things make sense when you look at it that way, because right now, when you look at a SOC analyst and what they have to do around response, right, they're sniffing through logs that's coming through some form of SIEM, and they're running KQL queries to find out what's been happened, right? But actually, you need to start somewhere, and we believe all roads start with an assessment to understand where you are, right? It's a point-in-time snapshot of what your security posture looks like. So how do
as well as it gives you an inventory, right? Because most of our customers, I think I can think of in 11 years of doing this, I can think of one customer who had semi-accurate inventory of anything and was able to bring up a CMDB or a change management database and able to reference that in the context of security. And most of our customers have got so much stuff out there, either in the cloud or in cloud services or in their own data centers, that we need to start with an assessment to understand what have we got and at what state is it and how vulnerable am I? And then if we assume breach on top of that, we could be busy all day with trying to find breach and remediate that.
Exactly. And I think that's also something that we hear back quite often from clients. They are really getting surprised. Oh, do I still have those machines in there? Are those accounts, are they still in there in the Active Directory? I thought I removed them. I told somebody to remove it, but nobody's checking, right? So it's the same story over and over again. And I think, understanding where you are today and make sure that you can build a business plan and a security plan based on where you are today, that's of great value for anyone. And then at some point, you start making some improvements, and let's say a quarter later, you measure the temperature once more, right? You check in, you prove the progress. Also very relevant if we talk about business management versus IT and security management. Business management doesn't like to invest it in security, right? But if you show them the risks in the first assessment, and then they spend some budget, they also want to know, what do you do with my budget? And you can implement a great firewall, you can remediate the risk and have better management of your servers and your workstations. That's completely invisible to the management board, right? So they just see a huge chunk of their budget going to security, but what did you do with it? Doing another assessment, showing them that you have improved your cybersecurity position, that's how you can continue that conversation with them as well. So make sure that you can measure that over time and prove internally, but maybe also to relevant authorities like governments or other institutions where you need to report to. Make sure that you can show that you know where you are, that you have a plan moving forward. Should something happen, right? Something could still happen. At least you have a good story to the outside world and also to internal stakeholders.
My parting thought around the assessment and breach is that we assume breach, and very often we do an assessment, and then the reason why we would do multiple assessments after that is that second assumption that we do, which is we assume apathy as well. Unless there's a reason to change something, we don't, which is why those accounts are there and why those vulnerabilities are. So we love multiple assessments because it gets us through the assume breach as well as assume apathy mindsets.
Yeah, that's very
all right,
right.
gentlemen, to wrap up, we're not going into buzzword bingo because it's UEBA, user and entity behavior analysis, but we're not going to talk about that because we're running out of time on this week's show. Dennis, how do people get hold of you on the interwebs, the Twitteratis? You don't have to give out details, and we encourage you not to give out your email address on the show. You can always add your email address when it actually
Sure.
in the comments after this live goes out.
Absolutely, but people can find me on LinkedIn. That's what I use mostly. There is an old Twitter account somewhere out there on the internet, but I don't use that too often. I don't know what my last post is actually, so I hope it's something decent.
Cybersecurity is all the rage on Twitter, by the way. You can follow me
to create one now.
Yeah, you should show up. It's where the cool people are.
Exactly.
Well, thanks everyone for sticking around on this episode of SCI Fridays. You can find us on the interwebs. My name is in the thing. Where's the thing?
Wrong finger. I always have to think what finger. There's me. What direction? There's me at Nicholas Blank.
And stick around. We'll catch you next time. Ciao, ciao.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Pleasure. Thank you for coming on.